The wind that swept across Portland that evening was sharp and restless, the kind of wind that rattled neon signs and whispered secrets through half-empty terminals. Travelers hurried to catch their holiday flights, coats pulled tight, shoes clapping on the tiled floor. No one noticed the tall, polite man who stood patiently in line at the Northwest Orient Airlines counter. He gave his name simply as Dan Cooper. No middle name, no small talk, no hesitation. He purchased a one-way ticket to Seattle, paying in cash, $20 exactly. The ticket clerk barely looked up, just handed him the stub. Cooper adjusted his black tie, thanked her with a faint smile, and stepped toward Gate C2. He looked like any other businessman of the 1970s, neatly pressed suit, white shirt, dark sunglasses that stayed on even indoors. He carried a plain black briefcase and an unlit cigarette between his fingers. Nothing about him drew suspicion. Not yet. When he boarded Flight 305, a Boeing 727-100, the flight attendants greeted him with their usual professional warmth. "Good evening, sir." "Good evening," he replied in a low, measured voice. He chose seat 18C, near the rear of the cabin. He ordered a bourbon and soda, paying cash again, and waited as the aircraft's engines hummed to life. Outside, dusk was falling fast, one of those gray Pacific evenings when the horizon disappears and the sky becomes an endless ocean of fog. The passengers, 36 in total, chatted quietly, unaware that history had just boarded among them. The note. Shortly after takeoff, a flight attendant named Florence Schaefer noticed the man's hand extend into the aisle. Between two fingers, he held a small piece of paper. She smiled politely, thinking it was a phone number. "Thank you, sir," she said, tucking it into her pocket without reading. Cooper leaned closer, his tone polite but firm. "Miss, you'd better read that note. I have a bomb." Florence blinked, startled, but Cooper's expression was calm, almost gentle. No anger, no panic, just a quiet certainty. She unfolded the note. The handwriting was neat, deliberate. It read, "I have a bomb in my briefcase. I want you to sit beside me." She did. Cooper opened the briefcase just enough for her to see inside. Red sticks, wires, a battery, something that could easily be dynamite. He closed it carefully and smiled. "I don't want to hurt anyone. I just want some money and a way out." The demands. His list was specific and surprisingly reasonable. $200,000 in cash in $20 bills. 4 parachutes, 2 main, 2 reserve. A fuel truck waiting in Seattle to refuel the plane for his next flight. He instructed Florence to deliver the message to the cockpit. Captain William Scott read the note, glanced back down the aisle, and saw Cooper sitting calmly, sipping his drink. The captain immediately radioed air traffic control. The chain reaction began. Within minutes, the FBI and Northwest Orient's headquarters were notified. Cooper, meanwhile, seemed at peace. He smoked quietly, occasionally looking out the window at the darkening clouds. The stewardesses later said he was polite, even charming. Never rude, never threatening. He tipped them for drinks. He talked about local weather. He seemed to be in control of time itself. The atmosphere in the cabin. As the plane began its slow descent toward Seattle, Cooper's calm spread through the crew. Passengers were told only that a minor mechanical delay required landing later than expected. They relaxed, unaware that the man in the back was rewriting aviation history. Outside, the rain began to fall harder, thick drops sliding across the windows. The cabin lights glowed amber, soft and sleepy. The engines hummed a steady lullaby. For the listeners of your story, this is where the rhythm slows, the calm before the storm. Cooper looked at his watch. It was just past 5:45 p.m. He leaned forward and asked softly, "Are they ready with the money?" The stewardess nodded nervously. The exchange. By 8 p.m., the aircraft landed at Seattle-Tacoma Airport under FBI surveillance. Every movement was carefully choreographed. The plane taxied to an isolated runway. Cooper told the crew to close all blinds to prevent snipers from getting a clear view. Through the small windows, agents brought a brown canvas bag filled with $200,000 in neatly wrapped $20 bills, marked, photographed, serial numbered. Then came the parachutes, bundled in duffel bags. Cooper inspected each item calmly. "Looks good," he said, setting the briefcase aside. "Now, let's get the passengers off." He released everyone except the flight crew, 3 pilots and 2 attendants. No one was harmed. As passengers stepped out into the rain, none of them knew they'd just shared a flight with the most mysterious hijacker in American history. Preparing for takeoff again. Once the cabin was quiet, Cooper began giving new instructions. He wanted the plane to fly to Mexico City, but he insisted on unusual flight conditions. Keep altitude below 10,000 feet. Maintain speed under 200 knots. Keep the landing gear down and the rear staircase lowered. The pilots explained that the plane couldn't fly that far without refueling. Cooper thought for a moment, then agreed to stop in Reno, Nevada for fuel. He asked for the cabin lights to be dimmed. He loosened his tie, removed his sunglasses for the first time, and looked momentarily human, tired, focused, and strangely serene. The moment before the leap. At 7:40 p.m., Flight 305 took off again, its engines slicing through the stormy Washington sky. The world below was a blur of forest, river, and darkness. Cooper stood near the rear staircase, his black suit fluttering in the cabin draft. He tied the money bag tightly around his waist. The crew felt a pressure change as he opened the aft stairs. Warning lights blinked in the cockpit. Captain Scott shouted over the intercom, "Mr. Cooper, please be careful. It's rough out there." No answer. Only the sound of rushing wind. Then, somewhere over the forests near the Lewis River, in the black belly of the storm, he jumped. Aftermath in the cabin. The crew knew instantly when the weight shifted. The aircraft rocked slightly, a vibration in the tail. The indicator light for the rear stairs flickered from open to closed as the pressure equalized. Cooper was gone. The cockpit fell silent except for the steady hum of the engines. The pilots exchanged looks, part disbelief, part relief. They had just witnessed something that didn't feel real. When they landed safely in Reno after midnight, FBI agents swarmed the plane. They found 2 unused parachutes, Cooper's black tie, 8 cigarette butts crushed neatly in an ashtray. The briefcase was gone. The beginning of the legend. By morning, every radio station in America carried the story. "Skyjacker vanishes with $200,000, blared headlines from coast to coast. The name Dan Cooper spread like wildfire, though an early news mistake changed it to D.B. Cooper. No body was found, no parachute, no trace. The forests of Washington were searched for weeks, then months, then years. For a country just entering the cynical 1970s, haunted by war, distrust, and change, D.B. Cooper became a strange kind of folk hero, a man who defied the system, disappeared into the storm, and hurt no one. Take in those Poen covers with me. For several long minutes after the red warning light blinked in the cockpit,
No one spoke. The crew stared at the instrument panel, listening to the hollow wind rushing through the open rear stairs. Captain William Scott steadied the yoke, hands trembling slightly. The rain thudded like gravel against the windows. The Boeing 727 felt different now, lighter, emptier, like a ghost of itself. Somewhere behind them, the man called Dan Cooper had vanished into the endless black sky over southwest Washington. "Is he gone?" whispered Flight Engineer Harold Anderson. Captain Scott didn't answer. He simply nodded and adjusted altitude to keep the aircraft level. The storm outside was merciless. Icy rain, swirling gusts, and temperatures dropping below freezing. Even trained parachutists wouldn't jump in such conditions. Yet Cooper had leapt without hesitation, vanishing as if swallowed by the clouds. The emergency landing. At 10:15 p.m., with fuel running low, Captain Scott requested permission to land at Reno Tahoe Airport. FBI agents, local police, and news crews were already waiting. As the 727 touched down on the wet runway, its tires screeched. Floodlights surrounded the plane. Officers with rifles crouched behind vehicles, expecting a gunman or a body to emerge. But when the cabin door opened, there was only the exhausted crew. Cooper was gone. So was the money.
Inside, investigators found faint clues scattered like breadcrumbs. 2 parachutes left behind. A black clip-on tie on seat 18C. 8 cigarette butts crushed neatly in the ashtray. A single black hair clinging to the headrest. No fingerprints on the briefcase latch. No note. No trace of the man who had walked aboard with such quiet confidence. The FBI agents looked at one another, speechless. It was as though he had never existed. The search begins. Before dawn, helicopters from McCord Air Force Base swept over the suspected jump zone, dense forest stretching from aerial to woodland Washington. The search area was vast, cold, and unforgiving. Snow covered the hills. Rivers ran high with winter rain. Agents trudged through mud and pine needles, their boots sinking deep. They found torn branches, animal tracks, and the occasional scrap of fabric, but none belonged to a parachute. For weeks, search parties combed the wilderness. Planes circled overhead, infrared cameras scanned for shapes, and divers explored the Lewis and Columbia rivers. Nothing. Not a dollar bill, not a shoe print. The media dubbed it the Great Northwest Manhunt. Reporters camped near the forests, spinning theories. Maybe Cooper crashed in the river. Maybe he hid in a logging camp. Maybe he was still out there, watching. The legend had begun. America reacts. By December 1971, D.B. Cooper was a household name. The typo, born from a reporter mishearing Dan Cooper, stuck forever. Americans couldn't stop talking about him. He was everything the era secretly admired. Bold, mysterious, and utterly free. While the nation grappled with the Vietnam War, distrust in government, and cultural upheaval, this polite skyjacker had managed to outsmart the FBI and vanish into thin air, without hurting anyone. Late-night hosts joked about him. Country singers wrote songs. Bars named cocktails after him. In living rooms across the U.S., people wondered, where would you hide $200,000 in 20s? Even the FBI felt the pull of fascination. Agents pored over every serial number, hoping one would resurface in circulation. But week after week, nothing changed, until the case began to fade into myth. Clues in the wind. Years passed. The Boeing 727 model was redesigned. Rear stairs were locked during flight, now called the Cooper vane. Airlines tightened security, ending the carefree golden age of air travel. But the mystery refused to die. In 1978, a hunter in the Cascade Mountains found a rotting placard with instructions from a 727's rear stairway. The find reignited speculation. Maybe this was part of Cooper's plane torn off when he jumped. Then, in February 1980, a new clue surfaced that stunned the nation. Money on the riverbank. A young boy named Brian Ingram was camping with his family along the Columbia River, just north of Portland. While digging a fire pit, his shovel struck something odd: 3 rubber-banded bundles of decaying $20 bills. When investigators examined them, the serial numbers matched the Cooper ransom exactly: $5,800 in total. The bills were water-damaged but unmistakable. They had been buried under layers of sand for years. How did they get there? Had Cooper buried them intentionally? No one knew. But the discovery kept the mystery alive and gave bedtime storytellers like you another thread to weave into America's favorite unsolved legend: the man behind the name. The FBI interviewed hundreds of suspects. Some were ex-paratroopers, others frustrated engineers, even a few dreamers confessing for attention. One stood out: Richard Floyd McCoy, a Vietnam veteran who hijacked another 727 in 1972 using nearly identical methods. He parachuted out with $500,000 and was later captured. Many believed McCoy was Cooper, but the FBI disagreed. McCoy was younger and his handwriting didn't match. Over the decades, other theories emerged. Robert Rackstraw, a former military pilot with a secretive past. Duane Weber, a dying man who allegedly whispered, "I'm D.B. Cooper," to his wife. Even the idea that Cooper was Canadian, inspired by the Dan Cooper comic books popular in Quebec. Each lead shone brightly for a moment, then faded into uncertainty.
The myth deepens. By the 1990s, Cooper had transcended fact. He had become folklore, a modern outlaw ghost haunting America's collective imagination. Documentaries aired. Novelists romanticized him as a gentleman thief. In 2016, after 45 years, the FBI officially closed the case. No suspect, no body, no closure. But for the American public, Cooper never really disappeared. In bars from Seattle to Denver, travelers still tell his story on rainy nights, how a polite man in a suit ordered bourbon, handed over a note, and vanished into a storm with the world watching. The mystery feels timeless, part crime, part dream, part lullaby. A bedtime reflection for listeners. Maybe he died that night, tangled in branches, the river swallowing his secret. Or maybe he walked through the trees, drenched but smiling, breathing the free air of the Pacific Northwest. Maybe he lived quietly, growing old, watching each new Thanksgiving pass as the news replayed his name. The beauty of the D.B. Cooper story isn't in the answer. It's in the space between questions. The hush of the wind, the calm of the clouds, the sense that somewhere, above us all, mystery still lives. The storm ended, but the legend never did. After the last FBI agents packed up their muddy boots and folded maps, the forests of Washington fell silent again. The rivers kept running, the mountains forgot, but America didn't. For the next 20 years, D.B. Cooper sightings became a national pastime. In diners along Highway 99, truckers swore they'd picked up a stranger with a nervous smile and a bag that jingled. In Reno, a motel clerk claimed a guest had checked in that stormy night, soaked, shivering, and paying cash. None of it ever proved real, yet each tale added another shimmer to the myth. D.B. Cooper had become more than a man. He was a story people needed to tell, to believe that somewhere, someone had beaten the system and simply vanished into freedom. A case that wouldn't die. Inside the FBI's Seattle field office, a special file grew thicker each year. NORJAC, short for Northwest Hijacking. Thousands of pages, witness sketches, weather charts, ransom bills' serial numbers, fragments of parachute material that turned out to be something else entirely. Agents chased rumors across decades. In 1979, a letter appeared in the Oregonian newspaper, signed D.B. Cooper, taunting investigators. In 1981, a flight attendant received a Christmas card that simply read, "It was never about the money." In 1990, a woman turned in a confession tape from her ex-husband, claiming he was Cooper. Each lead flickered and then went dark. The Bureau's official position stayed the same. No conclusive evidence, no identified suspect, case ongoing. But the world outside the file room was moving on and transforming Cooper into a cultural ghost.
The making of an American folk hero. By the 1980s, D.B. Cooper's face was printed on T-shirts, beer labels, and novelty posters. Hollywood toyed with the idea of making him the next Robin Hood, a polite thief who harmed no one, outwitted the authorities, and disappeared without a trace. He was the perfect anti-hero for a restless America, cool under pressure, sharp, mysterious, free. In a time of economic change and political fatigue, Cooper symbolized rebellion without violence. People didn't just fear him, they admired him. Even today, local festivals in Washington celebrate D.B. Cooper Days, where residents drank, danced, and launched model parachutes into the river. It's part history lesson, part bedtime story for grown-ups, a reminder that some mysteries belong to everyone. Theories that refuse to fade. Over the years, investigators, historians, and amateur sleuths have proposed hundreds of theories. Here are the 5 that haunt the legend most. He didn't survive the jump. The official FBI stands for decades. The storm was brutal, the terrain deadly, and Cooper was ill-equipped. No parachutist, they argued, could have survived those winds at night. If true, Cooper's bones may rest somewhere beneath the evergreens, his briefcase long dissolved by rain. He was a skilled paratrooper. Many believe he did survive, that his calm demeanor proved military training. Perhaps a Vietnam-era veteran tired of war, seeking one final act of control. He may have planned every detail, knowing exactly where to land. The inside job. Some whisper he had help, maybe from within the airline industry or the Air Force. His technical knowledge of aircraft suggested experience. Did someone on the ground help him vanish undetected? The double life. A theory born from whispers in small towns. Cooper lived under another name, quietly raising a family. Each Thanksgiving he'd pour a drink, turn on the news, and watch his own ghost appear on TV. The myth itself. Perhaps D.B. Cooper never truly existed as a single man. Maybe he became a symbol stitched together from fragments of truth, an idea too powerful to belong to one person. The human side of the mystery. Every legend has victims and witnesses who never forget. Flight attendant Florence Schaefer rarely spoke publicly, but in her later years, she described Cooper as oddly kind. He called her Miss, apologized for the inconvenience, and even offered to pay for her meal after the hijacking ended. Captain William Scott retired quietly, haunted not by fear, but by fascination. He once told a reporter he wasn't angry, he was calm, like he already knew the ending. For those who lived it, the mystery was not about money or fame. It was about being part of something unexplainable, something that made the world pause between two breaths. A nation still searching. In 2007, modern DNA testing was performed on Cooper's tie. Tiny particles of rare metals, titanium and aluminum, suggested he may have worked in aerospace manufacturing. That narrowed the field, but revealed no name. Then, in 2016, the FBI officially closed the case. The file was moved to archives. The agents went home. But on the internet, the search never stopped. Online detectives mapped wind patterns, analyzed old photos, even simulated the jump with 3D models. Every few years, someone claims to have found the real Cooper. And every time, the world listens again. Because maybe the truth isn't the point anymore. Maybe what matters is the story itself, the soft, unending hum of possibility. Why the story endures. For American listeners, the D.B. Cooper mystery holds something deeper than curiosity. It's about freedom and risk, the idea that someone could step off the grid and write their own ending. The United States was built on frontiers, people heading west into the unknown. Cooper simply took that instinct upward, into the sky.
He became a modern myth of independence, the last man to outsmart the system without leaving a trace of blood or anger behind. And because no one can prove what happened, every person can imagine their own ending. That's why the story still puts people to sleep, not out of boredom, but comfort. It whispers, some mysteries can stay mysterious. Bedtime ending, the sky and the ghost. Picture it now as you drift. The storm has passed. The trees glisten with dew. Somewhere in the distance, a single parachute lies tangled in the branches, silver in the moonlight. A man wipes the rain from his face, checks his watch, and smiles faintly. He walks toward the horizon, the bag of cash slung over his shoulder, the forest swallowing his footprints. In the hush of the woods, only the river speaks, soft, endless, forgiving. It seems to whisper, maybe tomorrow someone will finally tell the ending. But we never do. We keep the mystery alive, retelling it in warm voices each night before sleep. Because D.B. Cooper isn't just a man who vanished. He's the reminder that wonder still exists in the dark corners of our world.